Hi, welcome to our panel discussion today. I'm very pleased to be here. My name is Emile Nuwaysir, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. My job here is to moderate a panel of some of your very interesting and excellent peers that we've assembled for this topic. We'll introduce those peers in a moment. But I think, as you can see from the title slide, you can see that the topic today is the ARM Action for Equality Task Force and the proposed sector internship program. Specifically, the topic for this task force and the raison d'etre is the topic of racial inequality and racial injustice, and specifically racism directed at the Black community. It's a complex issue. There's many facets. There's been heated debate. Seems like everybody has an opinion. But what's interesting about it is, from the perspective of a human being, it's not complicated. It's actually completely and totally morally unambiguous. Treating somebody differently because of the color of their skin is morally abhorrent. It's a stain on humanity, and it's unacceptable. I think we all accept that. It's antithetical to our collective vision as healthcare people. We're trying to improve the lives, improve the human condition, reduce suffering. It's antithetical to who we want to be and who we aspire to be. So if it's unambiguous, then why is it so complicated? Why does it persist? And what are we going to do about it? So that's what we'd like to talk to you about today. We have a great panel of your peers here to talk it through. I'd like to first start with an introductory slide from ARM, a statement on racial inequality and injustice. This was released immediately after the death of George Floyd in late May of this year. Hard to believe it's been about 4 months. Let me just state, ARM believes inclusion and diversity are fundamental to the amazing, life-changing innovation we represent. We oppose racism as a community. We support equal justice for all. And importantly, we admire and stand with the millions of peaceful protesters who demand needed change. That event, the death of George Floyd and the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, was the crystallizing event that helped us to form this task force and to ask the question, what are we going to do about the situation? And if I can go to the next slide, just to give you a perspective on biotechnology. This was a report released by BIO, and this was in January of this year on diversity and inclusion and diversity overall in biotech. And I think a couple main points to point out here. If you see on the left there, 32, 15, and 14% of total employees or the executive team or the board are people of color. 12% of some of these biotech organizations have no people of color. And somewhere between 4 and 1% are Black Americans. So obviously we have a problem in biotech. We have a diversity and inclusion problem. In the middle, you can see, as I said, the 4 to 1%, and the demographics for CEOs, 88% are white. So I think it's 5% are Black. So even at all levels of the organization throughout biotech, and this is as recent as you can get, the data shows that we have a demographics problem and a diversity problem. So this is what led to the Task Force for Equality and Inclusion, the ARM AFE. And I'd like next maybe to introduce you to your panelists here who will share the next 45 minutes or an hour. First, my name is Emile. As I've said, I'm the Vice Chair of the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine. I've been in that post for about 2 years. I consider ARM to be an incredibly important nexus for the future of our community. I've been a part of 4 different startups in my career from ground zero. I've worked for Roche, Fujifilm, and Bayer Pharmaceuticals. I'm currently the CEO of BlueRock Therapeutics, which is a wholly owned but independently operated unit of Bayer that reports to the CEO. My colleagues, Anshul Mangal, who you can see on the slide here, is the CEO and General Counsel and founder of Project Pharma. And let me just, rather than try to memorize all these things, CEO and General Counsel and founder of Project Pharma. It's a leading biologics and advanced therapies engineering consulting firm. They have pioneered the industrialization of advanced therapies, including 2 FDA-approved cell and gene therapies and a playbook that you can use as a reference for manufacturing and they have impacted many organizations in our community. He's a lawyer by training. The second panelist is Courtney Utsey. So Courtney, excuse me to reach here, is the head of HR operations, talent, and culture at Enzavant. She is, Enzavant, as you may know, is on track to apply for approval for a tissue-based RegenMed product next year. So that's pretty exciting. She heads up all the HR ops there at Enzavant. Specifically, she has a particular interest and a focus and expertise in diversity and inclusion, and as well as, you know, performance management, all those great things in HR. She is, besides being on this task force, the ARM task force, is a member of the National Society of Black Engineers and holds a degree in communications from Northeastern University. Our next panelist is Usam Usman Azam, excuse me. I'm so used to calling you Oz that I stumble over the formal name. I apologize. I told him I was going to call him by his formal name, and obviously I failed miserably. So you may know Oz. He's been in the community for a little while. He's currently the president and CEO of Tmunity Therapeutics since 2016. He has over 20 years of experience in biotech. He has in both US, global, and international pharma companies. He's had senior leadership roles in ClinDev, regulatory, and commercial. He was one of the founding members, or the founder, I guess you'd say, of the Novartis Cell and Gene Therapy business unit, and a member of the Pharma Exec Committee at Novartis during that heady time. He has also headed global medical affairs, health economics. He's been the CSO of clinical development and head of clinical development, regulatory. So he's a pretty broad background. Before that, he was CEO of Nuwaysir Therapeutics and CEO of something else here. Excuse me, I can find it. As Aspriva Pharmaceuticals. He is on the executive committee at the Alliance for Regenerative Medicine, has a degree from University of Liverpool, an MD, and is board certified in obstetrician and gynecology. And finally, Francesca, who is our Senior Director of Pricing and Market Access at REGENXBIO. She has an MPH from Yale in epidemiology and a degree in biology from Holyoke College. Today, she is, as I said, the Senior Director of Pricing and Market Access. You may know REGENXBIO is a clinical stage company. They're working on curative gene therapies like many of you may be. And she specializes in healthcare policy and market access. Her expertise goes all the way back through global pricing, HEOR. She's been, before joining REGENX, she was at Pharmathene, where she was Senior Vice President of Policy and Government Affairs and Program Management. She's before that at Guilford Pharmaceuticals and Covance Health Economics, several others. And I think she started her career as a legislative assistant, which is interesting, in the US Senate in the Department of Health and Human Services. So thank you for joining the panel. I really appreciate it. We've looking forward to the discussion today. Maybe before we flip through the slides, I can ask each of you, and maybe we'll start with Anshul because he's next to me on the slide, with how you and why you're here, why you're on this committee or this task force and as the chairman, and why it's important to you and what led to the journey here.
Thanks, Emile. Thanks for that introduction. Yeah, I mean, I think what we're doing on this task force and just, trying to address racial injustice and racial inequality is extremely important to me. I was actually born in India and I immigrated to the US when I was 10 years old, and my wife is Black. So, all these topics really hit home to me. So I faced a lot of racial discrimination growing up, but I was actually really fortunate. I had really strong parents who were always there for me and my brother consistently, and they always provided us a great guidance, stability. However, as we've seen, others aren't as fortunate as I am. They didn't have the support system that I did, didn't have the family that I did to overcome racial injustice and make something of themselves. So, I'm hoping that this task force, I can help others that may not be as fortunate, may not have that guidance, that support, and help them, achieve and help them give some of the same opportunities that I was given growing up.
Excellent. Courtney, do you have something you'd like to say?
Yeah, so my journey to the panel actually started with a conversation, a very somewhat awkward conversation initially. Shortly after the George Floyd incident, my CEO called me and said, "How are you doing?" And I said, "I'm okay." And she said, are you sure?" And I said, are you sure you want to know? And we kind of had a very awkward, but still had a conversation about, you know, some of how I was feeling in terms of being a Black woman in America and some of the systemic ways that have made that a challenge. Although obviously being a Black person in America and all the accomplishments that we've accomplished as a community is excellent, but there's still work to be done. And so my journey to the panel really started with my CEO saying, "Hey, I'm committed to learning more and doing my part. And I don't want to put that role of teaching me on you," is what she's saying to me. But she demonstrated a commitment to learning more. And from there, she then invited me to join this panel. And, you know, I think what it means to me is the start of that conversation that perhaps others either are unsure how to navigate, or maybe they haven't quite had that conversation before. And so I'm really excited to be here as we talk about some of the ways that we in this space can really do our part to solve the problem of diversity and inclusion.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Oz, would you like to give us your journey?
Yes, so my journey to this task force, really, I'm invited to this panel. I'm not part of the core task force, but so I'm appreciative of the opportunity to join you guys today. So, you know, the intrigue for me is, you know, how I actually came to the US as an immigrant myself, coming and being the descendant of immigrants, that originally immigrants to the UK. So I was born and raised in the north of England. I'm the son of parents who came from Pakistan. So, you know, I'm a child of the 70s, and the 70s in the UK was a tough place to grow up when you were a brown kid amongst a sea of white faces. But I was very fortunate that despite that, grew up in a very diverse community. So I saw the benefits of diversity very early on, and it kind of shaped my thinking. As you know, the society in the UK evolved its thinking towards a land of multiculturalism, and now I think with the world that we're in now, which unfortunately wherever you live in the world has become more divisive, you know, it's not as cool to think about, you know, the things that unite us. It's much easier to think about the things that divide us. And so in 2001, when I came to the US, and I actually came to the US a month after 9/11 as an immigrant, and I saw this amazing power of unity in the country, which, you know, I haven't seen unfortunately since that time. And that's just a sad reflection, I think, of society and the divisive politics that this nation has. But the real attraction to come to this nation was the mosaic that I saw of this notion of meritocracy, this ability to fuse people from all over the world, different cultures, different backgrounds. And I have to say, I found that an incredible journey over 20 years. But I'm also very familiar with the raw tenderness of the issues that have arisen over hundreds of years in this country that have made it what it is. But I think there's a moment in time that comes when we can dispense with the politics, and to Courtney's point, have those honest, authentic dialogues about race in this country. And it's with that spirit in mind and that openness that I come really to engage with this panel, because it's something I believe in. I believe in the power of diverse teams. I've had the benefit of sitting on diverse teams and non-diverse teams. And I can tell you which one I pick, both from what I like and basically what drives productivity. And I think there's so much science that's published, it's irrefutable now. If you want to challenge it, we can, but it's pretty clear, right? Diverse teams make or break organizations. And so I'm thrilled to see, first of all, as a member of the executive arm, the ARM organization and the exec standing for what is right from a humane perspective, as Emile said, but also really thinking about tangible, practical ways that we can engage on a discourse and actually trying to make a difference in the companies that we represent, ultimately with a hope in my mind of impacting the society that we live in some shape or form.
Excellent. Thanks. Thank you. Francesca?
Great. I would say that many of the reasons that I was excited to join the Action for Equality Task course, mirror those of my fellow panelists. I've been in healthcare, a long time now, over 20 years, and in biotech for about 15, and at various, levels within these organizations. And one of the things that I don't see are people who look like me, and I don't see them in the C-suite, and I don't see them in the boardroom. And I think there's room for all of us to play a role, particularly now in regenerative medicine, where we're looking at truly the potential to truly have transformative therapies, moving potentially to one-time aspirational cures. And I think it's important to have people of color at the table as these companies are formed and to drive the science. And as we've seen, with COVID, there's really large disparities in healthcare. And that's happened over a long time. And now we really see the consequences of that. And I think we'll have a much better opportunity to drive important science that can help all of us, and certainly can make a big difference in underserved and minority communities if we have people who are diverse in leadership. And so I think that this, the AFE provides an opportunity for us in a relatively nascent area of regenerative medicine, where we're just starting to bring products to the marketplace to diversify and develop organizations that truly support people of color, from the pipeline to supporting them through sort of growth and advancement, and to getting to having more people of color into more senior level positions. So looking forward to the panel today, and for working with my fellow panelists and task force members to see what we can do to chart a new course.
Great, thank you. That's a perfect lead in to the next topic I'd like to bring up, which is in the next slide, if you'll allow me, which is the mission of the task force. And maybe, Anshul, as the chairman of the task force, you can give us some idea of how this happened, what it is that, how this came to be and the mission of the task force.
Sure. I'll first read the mission of the task force.
Yep.
So ARM believes action is needed to address racism in America and elsewhere. The Action for Equality Task Force is being organized to explore what actions ARM and ARM members could take to help eliminate racial inequality and address underrepresentation of Black Americans and other minorities in our sector. So, after the horrible news related to George Floyd surfaced, many of us were, I was certainly taken aback. I was confused, and I had a lot of questions, and ARM actually really did a great job of hosting a call with a number of leaders from the regenerative medicine sector, because they felt that they thought that a lot of us were probably having those same questions in their head, and we're searching for answers. So we got on the call. There's a lot of us on the call, and we really had a nice, safe space and forum where we could have a truly honest dialogue about what our organization should be doing, what us as leaders in our organization should be doing, and what our responsibility is towards racial injustice. I figured out, like many other people on that call, that many of us were confused. Many of us didn't have a meaningful plan. Many of us didn't have resources to bring about the type of change that we think our community really needs. And many of us also just wanted the opportunity to ask other leaders, hey, what are your organizations doing? What are the types of things that are meaningful to your constituents, to Black Americans that are working in your companies? What type of conversations are you having? That felt, for me personally, I think that was really helpful. And I felt like for many others on the call, that was really helpful as well. And then I was on that call, I think it was Janet's idea, Janet, who's the CEO of ARMS, her idea to say, hey, maybe we need a task force that can help galvanize our community, the regenerative medicine community, together and find joint actions that we can collaborate on that may be more meaningful than what we can do individually. I certainly think, I still encourage all of the member organizations to try and do what they can, but if we can be part of something bigger and bring about a bigger, more meaningful change, I'm all for that. And I think we got overwhelming, acceptance from the members, from the leaders from the different organizations and their support that were on that call. So then the task force was formed, and our goal is to find, like I said again, areas that we as a regenerative medicine community can really come together and create a meaningful impact. And then hopefully we create a program or programs that the community can participate in and help move forward and become a part of.
Yeah, I think that if I remember that meeting, it had some of those awkward conversations, Courtney, that you referred to, except that it was, the tic-tac-toe of Zoom, but there was some clumsy conversation. But I think what came out of it was that, if I remember right, Anshul, is that it was just very clear we didn't just want to say something.
Right.
That words, while words are important and the words you use are important, it's more important that we collectively do something. And so what ARM didn't want to do was just to make a statement and then move on. So I think it's been,
yeah, I think like you said, Emile, I think conversation is important, getting educated is important, but then taking those conversations and turning it into meaningful action and impact is exactly what the task force is setting out to do. And I think for a lot of us, many of those conversations were awkward. We didn't know even how to have those conversations. And it's just been great to have people like Courtney and Francesca and Oz to be part of those conversations, and for me to understand others' perspective.
Yeah,
I think that was really meaningful.
Yeah, likewise. Oz, you talked a little bit earlier about how the evidence is irrefutable, that diversity helps us achieve our goals. And could you expound on that a little more as to how you feel about it and what the opportunity is for here? I mean, I showed you those bio statistics. We are clearly not, in biotech in general, a diverse organization. The question is, what's our opportunity in Regen Med, and how do you see it?
Yeah, so, human beings, we have a nature that we congregate to what is familiar to us. And that's just the nature of human beings, right? Familiarity. And, within the world of biotech, for sure, I think my personal experience has been that, because of the mission and the noble nature of what we do and the type of people, we're humanistic to a fault. I've yet to meet somebody in the life sciences I didn't feel had the humane gene in them, right? And I assume good intent off that basis. But I think what I've struggled with, and what I struggle with myself, and I put myself in this bucket, is unconscious biases. And those unconscious biases seem to have become very systemic, I think, in all sectors, right? Be that at tech sectors, the communication sector, the media, what have you. And there just comes a moment in time when I think you have to champion that. Is it an unrealistic expectation to have the makeup of your organizations reflect the societies that we live and work in and the communities that we live in? And, the data, it points to two things, right? As I mentioned, you can churn out hundreds of Harvard Business Study reviews and various other reviews that I know Courtney must know a lot about in HR, right? When you look at team dynamics and high performance of teams and how diversity, be that not just gender differences, but racial differences, ethnic differences, different perspectives, really produce a great product at the end of it. I think the other area for me that has kind of pained me in life sciences over 20 years, in the time I've been in life sciences, is the number of noble events and efforts that people have made addressing inequities when it comes to the patient side. And, COVID's a perfect example, right? Somebody already said that, right? The inequities when it comes to a pandemic really shine through, right? If you're a person of color or a minority, you have statistically a lower chance of recovering through COVID. And we still don't know the sequelae consequences of that. If I look at the field that I'm focused on, which is cancer, and the cancers we're working in, prostate cancer, more African males and men die of prostate cancer than white men. Ovarian cancer, breast cancer, more Black women die of ovarian breast cancer, but these are statistics that get buried. But it does force us to think that there's a moment in time when we need to think about this in terms of the makeup of our companies reflecting more of society, the society we live in. Because how do you get that share of voice and thought when it comes to your patients if you're not representing the patients and society within the makeup of the workplace that we're in? And I think, you know, the numbers, Emile, I've seen those numbers now for 20 years. Maybe we could say they've improved somewhat. Yes, there are more Black CEOs than before, but let's look at the baseline. Or there are more C-suite members, but look at the numbers as a whole across the board, right? We still have a long way to go, and there's no reason why we can't do it in a society like the US. And so when I look at the efforts of this task force, and I'm really, really excited about some of the things we're going to talk about next, because I think there are some real tangible things that make a difference in moving that needle, potentially seismically, if we do it right. Now, it won't happen overnight, but I think if we do some deliberate things in this sector of regenerative medicines, I think we can look back in 5 years and say, hey, you know, we move the needle significantly. At least that's my hope.
Yeah. There were a bunch of things in there. I think that point you made about unconscious bias, you know, if there's one thing that the last 4 or 5 months has shown us is that it's human nature to assume that we all see the world the same way, that we absorb the stimuli are the same, the data coming in, and that we all absorb it the same way. And it's pretty obvious that's not true, that we do have unconscious biases and we do see things differently. And that's certainly one place where we can start. There was another thread in there I want to pick up on later, maybe, which is that how do you blend patience and impatience in a you know, an effort like this where you sort of must be impatient, but at the same time you have to set goals and achieve them and move forward and keep moving. So I'm gonna ask maybe a few of you that later because you just stimulated that for me, Oz. But let me go on. We can flip through what we're actually thinking about doing here with the task force, and then we'll get there. So Francesca, maybe you could give us an idea here of the task force timeline and the work so far, and what we're imagining is how this would play out.
Right. Well, I think this follows on, this timeline follows on what Anshul spoke earlier about, sort of the impetus for kind of the task force. So right after those conversations among the executive committee of and the leadership of ARM, and Janet proposed the task force, the Action for Equality Task Force was born, and began its work in June. It's been working all over the summer, both to sort of really identify how ARM can leverage its resources and collective membership to move the needle forward. And I think we certainly had a lot of conversations about what's happening today, the impetus for the task force, but also talked about how can we best make a difference and what are the steps we need to take to identify kind of a path that makes sense for ARM working with its member companies. And so we spent quite a lot of time identifying those areas where we thought we could make a difference, and then trying to do research to identify potential partners who might be able to work with going forward if we wanted to really build in and form a pathway for more diversity and inclusion in regenerative medicine. And we came up with some sort of initial recommendations and initial potential partners, which will be discussed, I think, in the next slide. So I won't won't give away all the goodies.
I'll pick on somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the whole goal was to have our at least initial recommendations ready by the end of the summer so that we could present them to the executive committee in early September, which was done. And we found that there was a lot of support, encouragement, and enthusiasm about the recommendations that we were putting forth, as well as an ask for some additional research and information just to build a really robust group of activities. And then what's happening now is part of meeting of the MESA, and soon thereafter will be a board presentation, and then hopefully continued support and approval for our initiatives that we hope to launch this quarter, so the fourth quarter of this year, and in terms of moving forward with perhaps and initial recommendations and activities that we can then assess and tweak and then expand, because we really are thinking toward the long term. It's not just talking the talk, but it's walking the walk, and then ensuring that these are activities that can withstand the test of time to really be meaningful.
Yeah, excellent. Right, and that leads us to the scope of the things that we thought about. And I think maybe Courtney, can you give us an idea of the short and long term sort of concepts that the task force considered and where we ended up?
Sure. So, I think that as a group, we did an excellent job of thinking about our, recommendations or areas that we could go that have the most impact from a short, mid, and long-term perspective. And so we thought about them through 3 different categories. The first being access, the second being representation, and the third being R&D. And so, an example for access was clinical trial diversity. And I mean, look at the COVID pandemic, and I believe Moderna or one of the other organizations running their clinical trials has said, hey, we're going to actually pause that because we realize we don't have a diverse group of people in order to effectively run this clinical trial. And so we were right on the money when we were thinking about, what type of impact can we have there from an access standpoint. Representation, I think, is one that we'll talk a little bit about today, of course, as well. But we really thought about, what does board representation look like, and is there anything we can do better with that? And, how can we expand the pipeline of minority talent entering the regenerative medicine field? How can we recruit people into organizations and not just recruit them, but really support them while they're here as well? Because it's not just about, the diversity component, it's also the inclusion component as well. It's not just bringing them into the organization, but it's making them feel integrated, supported, and really prepared for success so that they can go ahead and channel their passions and their identity into the change and into the research and impact that they truly can have within these organizations. And then we also thought about our R&D as well, and really where are some of the areas of improvement in terms of, origin cells, and I don't have the background on that end, but of course, being in the room, it was interesting to listen to kind of the scope of everyone on the panel or on the task force, kind of sharing the different elements of which we might have an impact. And so where we landed for kind of our short to midterm is really on the representation front. And so in a bit, we'll talk a bit about, what we thought about when it comes to expanding the pipeline of minority talent. And that's really also a hint at what access can mean for people that are looking to get into this field and just don't know the opportunities that are there and don't know the organizations that are willing and eager to bring them in and help them grow and help them really develop life-saving therapies, in addition to the support element that I talked about a bit earlier.
Yeah, very good. So we ended up with the task force recommending to pursue this internship program. And maybe, Anshul, can you tell us how we ended up there on that as the start and what the thinking was there?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think just holistically, I think some of the statistics that we've shown earlier are just incredibly staggering. I think we know that Black Americans face systematic obstacles to getting good jobs. They continue to face higher unemployment rates, fewer job opportunities, lower pay, poorer benefits, and just greater job instability than others. Black workers are less likely than others to get hired into stable, well-paying jobs. Moreover, unemployed Black workers it takes them longer to find and secure new jobs than others as well. So I think those are some of the things we grappled with and looked at when thinking about how can we make an impact in that particular area. In addition, as we know, being from the regenerative medicine community, that there's a shortage of really great talent in our community. The number of clinical trials in advanced therapies, the number of therapies that are going to be commercially approved, the data that ARM provides on this every quarter is staggering. and we're going to need hundreds and thousands more people to accomplish the goals of the regenerative medicine community. So we thought an internship program would be a nice fit, not only for the community, not only for Black Americans, but also for the regenerative medicine community. And the other thing that we looked at was, as Courtney expanded, that we looked at a lot of different programs. We wanted to do something that was meaningful, and we wanted to do something that was not too long-term. We wanted to try and make an immediate impact. And we thought an internship program is something that the task force could really get its, hands into and make an immediate impact to the community. We also felt, as Francesca stated earlier, that, if the internship program did well, there's so many more components to it that we could add on to it, and we could expand it, pretty significantly over the years as we get additional buy-in from the community. So, all of those factors combined really led us to hone in on the internship program. We have significant goals. We want a significant participation from the ARM member employers. We want to place a significant number of interns, and it's going to take a lot of hard work from the task force, but also from the community, as the regenerative community as a whole, if we're able to pull this off successfully.
All right, excellent. Okay, so Courtney, we looked at sort of who we can partner with to do this and where we can find good talent for these internships programs. Do you have, can you help us understand where we ended up there? Who are these potential partner organizations?
They are out there. They're out there. And fortunately, I've been able to interact with some of them, as well as I'm sure the rest of us on the call. But we really, as a group, talked about, where's the opportunity for bridging that gap and really opening the door. And so some of the areas that we thought about were societies that really have outreach to minority students. And so there are societies out there that, sponsor minority research conferences, poster competitions, et cetera. And so those are great grounds for finding talent that are interested in potentially converting some of that research into the corporate world and into some of the organizations that ARM represents. Another area we thought about were industry professional associations and organizations. There are student-run organizations out there that have large scores of talent that, again, are really looking for that access and that opportunity. And lastly, but not least, of course, historical Black colleges and universities, so HBCUs, that have things like scholar programs and other really strong programs that are in the sciences or in STEM, really. All of these are great partners for a program like this. And, I think a bit about one of my very close friends who, it's funny, he's taken an element of his identity growing up with a grandparent who had a disease, who unfortunately passed away. And he really made that a mission of his in his research and in his academic career to cure that. And so I just think about the spark that forms and that's catalyzed from people like him who take an element of their identity and they marry it with their ambition. And to be able to see opportunities and to be able to hop on them, I can only imagine the change and the impact that he'll have someday when he's finishing up his Ph.D. and he's looking to join an organization. And it really makes me excited for some of the other people that are out there that are looking to do the exact same. And so I think this internship program is a great way for tapping into that potential and into that opportunity and really bringing in some of the capabilities that organizations might be missing or still looking to develop.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah. It's really an honor to work with people that are really excited by what they do, right? Which you just mentioned. So let's hope that we can find more of these junior people to energize us. So Oz, I understand that you at Tmunity, you have an internship program there, and I know you've been involved in these kinds of efforts in the past. Can you tell us how this might work, at least from your perspective, how it does work, and how you think our ARM initiative should work?
Sure. So here's an outline of what the task force have put together. I think this is a great blueprint for how companies could think about the journey. I think we've got 2 slides here. I'm going to cover this one, which is the sort of mentee perspective, so the candidate coming in,
yep,
and how the team have been thinking about it. And I can give you some perspectives as we bridge the next slide on sort of you know, the company angle, and you know, very fortunate to have been part of some mentorship initiatives at Tmunity. So clearly, you know, first of all, drumming up awareness, right? Making sure there's a funnel of candidates there, and how we do that through the appropriate communication channels. I think ARM's pretty good at that. And I think, you know, Courtney already highlighted also where that funnel is coming from, right? In terms of the existing relationships and how we basically find that talent pool. And I will say, I think the talent pool is there, but it's now competitive, right? There are opportunities for different mentorship programs now. So I think speed is of the essence for ARM in terms of supporting the task force of getting this implemented. The idea then would be that we get members from ARM to really explore that partnership with the interns in an online platform. Now, caveated, we're still evaluating, or the team is still evaluating the right platform. There's one that's been looked at, but I think we'll give team the time and give them the service to diligence and make sure it's the right platform. And then basically consider a matching service between mentor and mentees. That basically is a two-way process, right? What the mentee desires in terms of their background and their, you know, future goals, research goals, career goals and aims, etc., and their personal development and professional development. And also then seeing the match from the company perspective, right? In terms of, do they have, for example, if a mentee has a particular interest in a particular disease area, you know, if the company can accommodate that or is part of it or not, you know. So I think there's going to be a lot of filtering and funneling and matchmaking going on there. And that's typically the hardest part in my experience of the process, is actually, first of all, you know, getting the mentee framework established, but then also seeing who is the right mentor for that mentee. Doesn't mean to say you're a great mentor for somebody in one setting, you'd be the best mentor in another setting, right? And so I think tailoring that to the chemistry of the individuals is going to be very important. So I think this then next step of the matching being done is going to be very key. And the idea being that if we automate this and make it as easy as possible, right, that then the matching process can be then refined. And I think there's a desire that ARM doesn't want to just do this as a one-off, but be involved in the process as opposed to creating the blueprint, right, we've set it up and companies go. I think there's a strong desire that ARM have a degree of stewardship over this, which as an exec, I think we support. And then obviously getting the match done and getting the employer and the mentee together. And last but not least is actually mapping out, is it a great program? And for that, honestly, companies who need to get involved need to step up and put money where their mouth is, right? You need resources. There's no magic way of doing this out of the goodness of your heart and somebody just stepping up to be a mentor. Mm-hmm. I mean, some of us been mentors, some of us have not. There are do's and don'ts of mentorship. A mentor is very different to being a manager, for example, right? And there's nuances that people have to understand what the role of a mentor is. If a company hasn't done that, then I'm hoping this is a brilliant opportunity to actually work in a collective way to give ideas, best practices around what a great mentor-mentee experience can be like. And so then translating that into actual events, clearly we're in a highly unusual environment with COVID, but I can tell you we can do these things virtually. I mean, we've been running organizations and companies virtually. I think the ambition here is that we figure this out where possible. And then clearly within our company, you know, we've been very fortunate. We've had internships in finance. We've had internships in process development, analytical development. You know, next year we're going to probably expand those mentorships. And in certain instances, we've been able to get candidates, mainly from the Philly area, because that's where we're based, that have been coming in the labs as well on certain days, with obviously all the COVID precautions. So it really depends on the individual companies, their benefit risk ratio around these things. But I think doing something in terms of true engagement and work experience is going to be key. And then HR will have to think about all the other stuff, fun stuff around getting this done, stipends, you know, onboarding, etc., access to laptops, equipment, all those things. So hopefully this gives a walkthrough of what it could be like for the process for the mentee. And I think we're probably going to discuss the sponsor company side of this next.
Yeah, it raises a question. Anshul, let me ask him and then I'll go to you. Given that 4% of our workforce is people of color in biotech, which I showed you, how good a mentor can we be? I mean, I obviously did not grow up Black in America. I mean, I can mentor certain things, but I can't speak to the Black experience. And just let me ask you, how challenging is this when 4% of their mentors are potentially, experienced what they experience? Is that a handicap for the system, or do we just need to try harder? Is that a handicap for this task force, for this internship program? I'm asking anybody, any one of you.
Well, I'll be happy to jump in. I would say, I noted at the beginning of the panel that I have seen very few people that look like me in senior leadership positions, but yet I've had a number of mentors who have really helped me on my journey. And I don't think you have to be, Black to be able to mentor a Black candidate. And I don't think you have to be, white to mentor a white candidate. I think what you need is that commitment, right? A commitment to being present, to listening, to providing advice and support, and to being open, and to ensuring that as challenges arise, that you can be a sounding board and provide kind of constructive support, so that your mentee can learn and grow. So I think as long as there's that openness and commitment, and as Aj noted in his kind of the intern journey, and as I think you can probably move to the next slide in terms of the employers, we really are looking to engage the ARM community, companies in the ARM community that are committed to the program and to the mission and to diversity and inclusion. And I think the first step is that commitment to supporting an intern sort of across the board, because we're not looking at just coming for a couple of months in the summer and learning and that's it, but we're also hoping to infuse other types of activities and opportunities to really build a community. We want to be able to engage these interns and have them attend the meeting on the Mesa next year and in the years to come, and other potentially industry meetings. We want to create sort of a network, so that not only can those interns commune and learn and from each other, hopefully during the summer and beyond, but also that they'll help the next generation of interns come in and progress as well. So I think, I think you can be a good mentor in so many ways, and that, if there's a commitment there, then that's really the first step. And we're hoping to have, staff at ARM who can help to run the internship program so that there'll be support for mentors as well.
Yeah, right. I think what Francesca hit on is building the community is right. We're not just going to, bring on a bunch of interns and just drop them in to ARM members. We really want to be there as a support system to kind of help not only the interns, but also the ARM member companies kind of shepherd interns through the process. I think the task force is incredibly diverse. I think we've done a great job of not only having people of color on the task force, but with people of diverse backgrounds, and in all sorts of different leadership roles in various organizations. So I think collectively we have a really good, just broad view and skill set and experience. So we're hoping that, when the ARM member companies do get faced with tough questions, they can rely on us to be there for them to help answer those questions. But I think, just even broader than that, individually, I think all of us, even if we're not of people of color, I think, if we are faced with those tough questions, reaching out to others, having those conversations and figuring out the answers to those questions, I think it's an important process in creating racial equality. So, but again, we will be there to hopefully answer some of those questions.
And let's not forget, guys, I mean, there's a reverse to this as well, the other side of the coin, which is that you learn from your mentees. So, one of the most powerful moments I've had is having a Black mentee some years ago, who is a good friend of mine, who will remain nameless, who is now a very successful life sciences executive, has achieved great success. But I learned a tremendous amount mentoring him as the mentor. So Emile, your point in terms of, what you get out of this, Can somebody in their 50s who's life sciences executive gel with somebody? I think they absolutely can. But let's not forget what you learn from the mentee as well.
Yeah.
Helps shape you and informs you and makes you a better mentor to then pollinate this thinking, right? And again, breaking down those unconscious biases.
Absolutely.
I agree with that completely. It makes me think a bit about perception, right? So one of the things that we did at Enzavant recently is we did a workshop that was all about knowing me, knowing you. And we started that workshop with I am statements. I am this, I am that. And it was interesting to see how all of us in this organization from different walks of life and different backgrounds had some I am statements that were pretty similar to each other. And then we also had some that were a bit different too. And so I think that it's a perception thing as well when it comes to whether or not you can learn from a mentee or what the learning dynamic is on that, or even being able to relate to somebody who's different from you. Yes, there are certain things that are quite clearly different amongst all of us, and that's fine. In fact, that's what makes us awesome. But also, you never know where the similarities are as well, or the things that you have in common. And so it's really about being open to different possibilities and to having a change in perception. I think that goes a long way too, and really helps with a mentorship relationship and really a learning relationship as well. This is all about a journey, and we're all in different parts of that journey.
Right. Absolutely. And there are roughly 305 ARM member companies, and they all have something to learn and something to give. So irrespective of what their particular demographics are. So, well, that's really great. I think that was actually the end of our slides. It does lead to and I have a few questions. I'm interested if you have questions for each other too, but it leads to the basic, conclusion here, which is that we need you as members of ARM to participate in this, to join on the journey and look for more from the task force as we spell out how this is actually going to work. So that'll be coming soon, as we outlined in the timeline. So with the remaining few minutes, I think we have about a little more than 10 minutes, if I can get to go here. If there's anything you want to ask each other or ask me, I'm of course happy to hand over the reins here. But maybe I'll start. One of the things that struck me, and I think it was something, Oz, you said that was, a reflection of something that somebody else said, was about how there's an urgency to what we need to do, but at the same time, you need to set practical goals, I think. So I'm just wondering, how do you, and maybe I'll just pick on a few of you, unless one of you volunteers, think about that balance between what's reasonable patience and what's unreasonable impatience. How do you balance that?
Yeah, I mean, certainly on the task force, it's been kind of eye-opening. We've put so much time and effort to figuring out, hey, let's get all the ideas out there that, big or small, that we as a task force we want to accomplish, and then funnel them down to a program like the internship program. And then when we're even looking at the internship program, what is possible, what is not, and trying to be as detailed as possible. I think it's a constant struggle, because sometimes, we want to go fast and just try and put a stake in the ground as fast as possible. But I really feel like to make a really big impact and have a meaningful program that can last not just 1 year, but years and years and years, we really have to just be patient, be very organized, methodical, do our research, think about roadblocks, get alignment from the community. And it's just going to take time. But I think, we meet on sometimes multiple times a week, and we're really working hard to drive this forward. I think the excitement and the enthusiasm from the task force has been contagious. And I think we're going to continue needing that excitement, enthusiasm, as we move things along. So,
yeah. Excellent. Courtney, you were nodding. Do you have anything you want to add to that? Yeah.
Absolutely. I was thinking a bit about just the intentionality about doing something like this and continuing to have these conversations and continuing to brainstorm ways to have the most impact that you possibly can. I think there needs to be intentionality. I think I agree with everything that Anshul said about getting buy-in from the community, taking your time. I mean, one of the things to consider is that the George Floyd incident is one, unfortunately, of a few incidents that have happened. And since that incident, there have been more incidents. And so this is a issue that I think has been top of mind for a lot of us. It has been for myself, certainly, as I think about how I navigate, you know, my neighborhood and kind of my environment as a Black woman. And, you know, sometimes I ask myself, what was it about this time and this year that suddenly has people awakened to what's been going on for so long? You know, I mean, I've had the conversations with my parents about what to do, what not to do. I've seen how that's been helpful or not helpful, et cetera. And so I think that it's been really important as we think about the solution to remember the historical context, to understand that this is something that's been going on for a while in different ways, by different means, sometimes with cameras, sometimes without, and really striking the balance of making sure that the things that we're doing and the ideas we're coming up with are not just those quick fixes. Some of those will be good and will be helpful, but what are the things that we can do long term to really impact change and to really bring about some change? Because also people have been thinking of these things for a while as well. And so I think that this is a great opportunity for us to hop onto that momentum and really drive change and be that catalyst. But it's all about being intentional and understanding the context and then making the right plan and all of that.
Yeah.
I think it's also,
yeah, go ahead.
I think it's also that we're fortunate, right? I think being a part of ARM, having ARM host that initial call and getting us to the spot has been wonderful. You know, I would not have met folks like Courtney, Francesca, Oz, you know, and get their perspectives. And, you know, to launch something like this really requires, you know, a lot of people with different levels of experience. And I think that's been really helpful to have such a diverse group to be able to even, you know, ideate something like this.
Yeah, we have different things to contribute. We're at different points in our career. We've had different experiences, and that's part of it, right? There's new technicians and CEOs, and those are two totally different perspectives to the same challenge. So, Francesca, do you have anything you'd want to add before on that impatience question?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, to Courtney's point, you know, these things are sort of not new, but I think it's really important that we're able to take advantage of, you know, something that you cannot look away from, which is really George Floyd. And it's been able to sort of marshal, I think, real support and a beginning of understanding and a thirst to understand more from a much broader community. And so I'm impatient to take advantage of this opportunity, this opening, because it doesn't come all the time, but recognize that to be impactful and to really incite long-lasting, meaningful change, you know, that takes time and effort and a real plan. And I think that's what we've tried to do this summer, is really kind of think through what can we do first, recognizing we can't do everything, we can't meet every need, but that we can start with this initial internship program and then build that out, hopefully bigger and better, and expand going forward, and really try and put something in place that will last for the long term, because you can't have a short-term solution to a centuries-old problem.
Yeah. So Oz, I heard you say, you know, so we have 4% are people of color, Black Americans in biotech today. I think that's what the numbers said. It's 12% of our population. So there's a 4 to 12 challenge there. I've heard you say that the goal is it's obvious. It should be self-evident. It's 12%. We want 12% representation. Okay, we do this task force and we just knock it out of the park, and everybody does these, and we all do these things, and we move the needle faster, and we go from 4 to 12% at some rate. Or we do nothing and we creep along at whatever rate it is, regressive, forward, backward, I don't know. But do you have a thought on how fast we can go and when we could get there? I know that's sort of a ridiculous thing to ask you on the fly. I didn't give you a heads up, but when are we going to get there?
So look, I don't think that if you want to be part of an organization and lead organizations that are progressive employers of the future, you have no choice but to embrace this kind of philosophy of really, really addressing inequities in the workplace in terms of racial makeup and diversity makeup as a whole. I mean, clearly
Right.
we're focused right now because we got momentum because of the tragedies that have happened on something that's been festering in this society for hundreds of years. But look, when we look at gender gaps, right, there's a whole way to go there when it comes to, women in the workforce, when we're looking at other minorities. So I think this is the good thing about this, guys, is that it's forced those uncomfortable conversations that kind of need to happen, right? I mean, Courtney, you addressed it. You had that dialogue with your CEO colleague, right? And it prompted a dialogue. So I think in terms of what I see, I think that if a task force like this and the semblance of the fundamentals are laid out, there's some real quick wins that can happen here, providing the armed companies invest and look at this as a sustained part of a blueprint for what they want to do over 4 or 5 years. And then Emile, you and I have challenges, right? We've got to bring others along. We have to have these conversations at board level, right? We have to then get the galvanization that this is going to be part of the fabric. Now, if that homework and groundwork is done, and I mean, I'm putting it out there, my vision for Tmunity is I want to see 12% of my workforce being Black. There's an argument actually it should be higher based on where my company is, which is in Philadelphia, where the Black population is much larger than 12%. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I'm giving myself an aggressive goal. And as long as I'm the CEO of Tmunity, Joe, to be for the foreseeable future, I want to lay that genesis that at least under, my stewardship, that I could see that happening, and aim for the goal, right? But I agree with you. Small wins are big wins first. So look, we had a really healthy debate in the build up to this. How many mentees, right? How many companies, right? But I think we've got a good denominator both in terms of the companies and then also potentially how many mentees. But remember, getting those mentees requires a larger funnel, right? Mm-hmm. So I think if the fundamentals are laid out, there's no reason why we can be back next year and saying, hey, phase 1 of this was a huge success. Look, this is going to be a pilot, right? It has to be a pilot. It's the first time we're doing it, right? But I think if we can show stickiness and success and we get those mentees then going back and pollinating and talking about this sector, not just life sciences, but regenerative medicines, I think we'll be onto something. I think Carpe Diem, seize the moment, right? We're on a roll right now in society, and let's not squander this opportunity, right? Because I don't know if we're going to get that opportunity again. I don't know if in a year from now we'll dissipate and George Floyd's memory may get relegated, right? Hopefully it won't, because I think there's a spark that's been lit in society, independent of what political belief you have, right? This is independent of partisanship and politics, right? The fact that most people in this nation want to do good. They want to do good by society. And if you look at how curious, we're driven by curiosity in the life sciences, right? Scientifically, we're curious to a fault. I don't think it's too much of a stretch to be curious about this topic, because it's going to unlock and unleash a lot of capabilities and productivity in our companies. So did I give you a straight answer? I gave you my aggressive answer.
It was great.
I exceeds happens fast enough. But there's some minefields that we have to watch out. And I think if companies really think about this process of a sustained blueprint that ties this as one pillar of it, then there's no reason why we can't be successful in facilitating this happening.
All right.
Yep. I actually have a question for our 3 CEOs. So if I look at, I've been in 2 startup organizations, and just looking at when you're hiring with smaller organizations, more limited funds, then the internship program that we've been talking about here would be looking, at least initially, at those who are most likely at the collegiate graduate school level. But I found sometimes at smaller startups, you're looking for, you've got a smaller budget and you're looking for those with experience, because you've got to get a lot done.
Right.
in a short amount of time to demonstrate kind of the validity of your technology and get to proof of concept. And so there's not always an opportunity to bring in those who are right out of school and train them. So when you think about the type of internship that we're at least starting at now, although, you know, as Courtney noted earlier, we're looking certainly across the entire, you know, span of kind of the development cycle and trying to bring in folks early, mid, and grow, and then certainly looking for those at the C-suite and board. You know, how do you think our internship program then dovetails with your thinking about your needs and hiring and internships in the near term?
Right. I think it's pretty straightforward when you think about lab operations and labs, because we have a whole hierarchy of people that produce value, right? That create value in the lab. And that's from the most junior people that are sort of college level or even not yet college graduate, all the way through to 25-year PhDs. So there's a place for every single person, irrespective of where they're trained in that hierarchy. And in fact, the hierarchy works, you know, if it's the most junior person, the purpose of hiring that most junior person is to keep them and to train them, and so that you can keep filling from, you know, the junior people, and you can keep these really great people. So it's all about building a relationship with the person and training them a little bit and having them grow. And then they get bored with that job and you give them a new one and they get bored and they, you know, so it works in the sciences at least pretty easily. I think it's a little bit harder when you start thinking about biz dev or health economics, or maybe I'll look to one of my colleagues here to point to that, you know, but at least that part is straightforward.
That's right. I wrestled with this back in 2016, 17. To that point, that was a great example you gave of startup. So, and I'll be honest with you, I think a seed stage company, when it first starts, that's first 10, 15 employees, probably you're not doing the mentee a service or the company a service by saying you're going to do this. Now, having said that, you know, I give a lot of credit to my head of HR, Lauren Gordon, who actually back in 2017 started the genesis of this, so that by 2018 we actually had the first mentees in. And we're talking about diverse mentees, but not with a focus on Black mentees alone. But it was the psychology of getting into it. If you do it once early on, not really early, because then it's a disservice to the mentee. You know, you're not organized, you don't have the systems, they're lost, you know, you're trying to figure things out. It's unfair, right? But once you get to that sort of 20, 25 person size of a company, I think you can do it. I think you can be really, really effective. But you're going to have the sponsorship, and you're going to have the passion, and you're going to have a great HR business partner who's willing to take that chance and work with you, and ensuring the program can be set up. But it can be done. But, you know, once you get through that early seed stage phase, then I think companies can really pick on it if they choose to do so.
Yeah, I think
I'll give you the last word here, Anshul, because we're 65 minutes now, we're over. But maybe just if anybody wants to make a parting comment. But what were you? Sorry to interrupt.
The cost of you know, hiring someone is extremely high, especially, you know, and if they don't stick, it can be really detrimental to a company. So having a program where you can find qualified interns to help train and develop them over a summer, and then hire them in the future, could be really invaluable, of companies of all sizes. And I've seen interns that are, you know, in thousands of people and a handful of people. But, you know, again, all of this isn't possible without the support, and I think we've all said it, of the member companies of ARM. So I encourage all of the member companies that are hopefully watching this presentation, that want to, you know, get involved in our program. They want to help support racial equality and help stop discrimination, to please visit us online at the allianceregenerativemedicine.org Action for Quality website. Please email us. Please contact any of us on the task force, or otherwise individually.
But I think with that, we need to wrap this up. Thank you to my panelists, my fellow panelists here, for the conversation. It's the beginning of a much longer one. So thank you, and thanks to everybody for watching.